Hey man,
What's going on?
I'm good. It was a good weekend. Um, Apart from the fun of the weekend, like it was crazy. We touched on this at the end of Friday's episode, but we just almost doubled our subscribers to our YouTube channel just over the course of this weekend, over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's been going kind of crazy compared to what it has been. I just sent you a graph, like we started this thing, like our YouTube subscribers are it's like 5 here, 10 there, 5 there, 10 there, and then all of a sudden on Friday it like spikes, and now it's like much higher than where it was. um and you had talked about it, about a politician needing to ask for the donation. And I mean, this was just such a great example too of finally doing just a little bit of effort. Like seriously, all that changed on Friday was I put out a blog post. It took 15 minutes. It wasn't a lot of effort, and it was something I may have even been kind of avoiding, just because it was like, how could we've already written a blog post about it. How could something so little like change anything? But I did it anyway. Made sure people understood, like, hey, here's the channel subscription link. Here's where you have to go. I multiple times even included like a little JavaScript widget, so you just have to click a button for those people who weren't ad blocking it. But yeah, I mean, I reminded this over and over again. Like with blogging, I learned my lesson with, I was like stuck for a while with like the number of blogs, number of Twitter followers I had, or people reading my blog. I just started asking, like, hey, PS, please follow me on Twitter. Dustin Curtis showed me that there's a really great post he has about the just doing the analytics of whether he included this little link at the end of his post that like was like, follow me on Twitter. And as soon as he did that, his like Twitter followers spiked like crazy. And this was just another good example. I mean, now we're getting some great subscribers. Some things happen now that we're in this new threshold of we're like 500 plus subscribers. We can start getting like a custom YouTube channel name, and but it was another lesson. It was repeated again. Like I have to be better at encouraging people to kind of follow us on this new channel, and pay attention to kind of what we're doing here, not just hope they're going to return. But it's like this in anything, sales, raising money. There's some great people out there who talk about like, hey, I had this meeting with an advisor, and then all of a sudden I realized, like, hey, why don't I just ask him to invest in the business? And then he did, and it was like this really, like, all you have to do is ask, and it opens up all these doors. What's the worst that could happen? You get a little embarrassed, maybe.
Yeah, and you won't even be embarrassed. It's I think when you have something and you've made something, you just expect other people to know what to do to participate in it. But it's not even that they know what to do or don't know what to do. It's just like, you have to invite, if you, it's like imagine putting a bunch of food at your house and some drinks, and just like hoping people are going to show up on Friday night at 8 o'clock for the dinner you made. Or you can just ask them to show up. And if you ask them to show up, they will come probably, or they'll say no, but at least you'll know. And I think it's very similar. It's not quite the same thing, of course, but it is similar. Like, we're doing a show. We're doing this thing every day. This is our 20th show. We want people to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We want people to hear about it on Twitter. We want people to know about this thing. So why don't we ask them about it? Why don't we tell them about it? Why don't we tell them, ask them to subscribe so they're told about it automatically? Like, why wouldn't we do that? And it's so obvious after you do it, but before you do it, you just kind of assume it'll just happen on its own, and it's not. I mean, it will organically at some point probably, but you can jumpstart it by just making a few simple requests of people, and no one feels obligated. No one feels like we're putting them out by just saying, hey, if you like what you're watching here, subscribe, and we'll let you know when there's new ones to watch. Simple as that. So it is a great, simple, fundamental, basic lesson. Again, there's all this there's the growth hacking techniques and all this stuff to get more traffic, and sometimes you just have to ask for it. Can I have some more traffic? Can you follow us on YouTube? Can you check us out? Like, that's all you have to do, rather than like hack the whole world to try and get people to pay attention to you.
Right. And and yeah, I mean, I was pondering all these other like projects that are going to take a lot longer time, and like, seriously, there's so much ROI just from spending 15 minutes on writing a blog post to just ask people, hey, here's our subscription link, please don't forget to sign up. And obviously that pays off dividends later when people get notifications now and we have new shows. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, more of that for everybody. I think it's important.
Yeah, totally. So how's everything else going? How's BC3 going?
It's good. It's very good. We're starting officially beta testing this week. We've had a few people using it. You guys had at least poked around in it, and a few other people are using it, but like getting some more people on this week. So I've been sort of working on recruiting some people, making sure that the right people, that they have something new, a new project coming up, making sure their team size is interesting. Some people are Basecamp users, some people are not. So I'm just kind of trying to get the right mix to get going. So hopefully we'll have some people going this week. What I'm doing is we don't have the all the onboarding built in the product yet, so we're working on that now. And so what I'm doing is I'm giving everybody a personal tour. So I got to line up like Skype or Hangouts for people so I can walk them through the whole thing just so they understand it, because there's nothing there right now. There's a lot of assumptions in the product right now that people just get it, and they might, but I feel good about walking them through it personally, making sure they can get started, in the best way, and then I'll be checking in with them personally while they're using it once a week, or I don't know, whatever it is, and just getting some feedback. We'll also set up a project for people to post their thoughts and whatnot. So it'll be good. So the first time we've really had significant eyes from the outside on it, so that'll be nice. We were talking a little bit before the show about this bet that we're making. We've made this bet twice before and we've been wrong, and we're making it again because we don't know what's good for us sometimes, or we think that world has changed a bit. When we launched Basecamp Classic back in 2004, we didn't have a calendar. We had what was called milestones. So milestones were a place where you could keep track of deadlines, and it worked out really well. And then naturally, people wanted a calendar, like a full-blown calendar. Back then in 2004, there were really no good online calendars. There was like Yahoo Calendar, I think. It was just pretty bad. So the world definitely needed a good calendar, and the Basecamp calendar, and also the Backpack calendar, which is another calendar we built, were very, very good actually. But we didn't launch Basecamp with it. We built it later. And then we launched BCX in 2012, I think it was, the current version of Basecamp. And we did build a calendar, but we were considering not building one. We actually talked to Bezos about this to get his advice on it, and he said, if you guys aren't feeling great about not having one, just take the extra 2-3 months and make a great one and just do it. And don't worry that it pushes your launch back, because it's, all things considered, you're a long-term company. It's a long-term product. Like if you're a couple months late on it, no one's really going to notice, and you can make the product better. So we did launch with a calendar in BCX in today's Basecamp, and then we added more calendars later. We added an ability to have a calendar inside of a project versus just a global calendar. And so that was sort of what we did. And then with Basecamp 3, the one we're working on now, we've opted not to build a calendar this time around. We think that the ground has shifted a bit, that everyone's got a really robust, solid calendar now. Personal calendars, Google Calendar, Fantastical, iCal, Outlook, whatever. And we think what's better, what we've optimized for instead, is be able to create events inside Basecamp, but then make it really simple to pop those on your own calendar, whatever calendar it is that you're using. Rather than try and make a whole group switch over to a different kind of calendar, we'd rather have more of an agenda view with all the events, with very distinct, simple ways to get those things on whatever calendar you're using. So it's more about personal choice in terms of what calendar you prefer to use versus being sort of pushed in a specific direction, which is sort of competing with the other calendars you have at work. And then people are like, where do I put this? Do I put it on this one or that one? So we're making this bet for the third time, and very curious to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of evidence kind of hit you, I guess, during BCX? Like, are people, do you look at the metrics behind this? Are people not using it, or is it anecdotal? Are you hearing anything from like these interviews you do with customers that they already have things like Google Calendar that they're really happy with? Like, how have you kind of distilled all of that feedback and information to kind of come up with some of this?
So the calendar itself, people actually adding events to the Basecamp calendar. So things show up on the calendar, and then things are added expressly to the calendar. So for example, dated to-dos show up on the calendar. So that doesn't require anyone to actually use the calendar, it just shows up. So, but if you look at actually events being added to the calendar, it's not as popular as our usage. We are the most high-end pro users of the Basecamp calendar. We put our entire company schedule, every little detail of every event and who's out of town and on-call schedules and craziness, right? But that is not how most people use the Basecamp calendar. So our view has been skewed. And we looked at the numbers a bit, and it's not a really popular feature, all things considered, yet it's an extremely difficult feature to build well.
Sure.
Very complicated. Calendars are surprisingly still very complicated. There's a high level of fidelity expectation in terms of being able to drag and drop things. And it's actually surprisingly complicated to build a really nice calendar, and then all the different things around calendaring. And what I did was I wanted to force us as a company out of our own world. So I said, we're going to stop using Basecamp Calendar and we're going to move over to Google Calendar. Like, let's be more like our customers. That's what our customers are using mostly. And they have other ones too, but like, let's get off of our own thing and stop looking at our own stuff, and let's live like everyone else lives for a little bit and see how that feels. And there was some internal backlash around that, and it's been kind of interesting. But one of the outcomes was that when we started adding events to Google Calendar, we saw how most things worked, which is that most people don't have a shared calendar necessarily on Google. Some do, but a lot of people have individual calendars and they add events to their own when someone invites them to something. And started seeing more and more of that behavior. And that was pretty interesting. And then we also realized that to build, like, everyone wants a calendar on their phone, and it's got to sync, which means it's got to be CalDev
Right.
backend, which is like difficult to do as well and tricky, and for a variety of reasons. And like iCal stuff doesn't sync, and we're like, well, everyone's got a calendar on their phone now built in. Let's just make it really easy to add events to it instead. So that's what we're doing. Also, the idea is that Basecamp is a little bit more about, we want to push it more in the direction of a place, of a specific place to go get information about the project, not to make it this like general calendaring tool. And when you have a sort of calendar, you have to build this general calendar, all these general calendar features, versus like allowing you to set milestones and deadlines and have data to-dos and things appear in different ways. And it's a different kind of product. So anyway, we're making the bet again, and we'll see how it turns out, and we'll see where we end up. But so far, it's been pretty good, I think, all things considered. But anyway, it's an interesting thing that we keep denying ourselves not denying ourselves. We keep trying to talk ourselves out of making a calendar, and then for the past 2 times we've had to make one.
Yeah.
I'm curious what happens this time around.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I mean, this is really an interesting kind of case study of a couple things, like not being not giving in to trying to make the real feature rich, because I'm sure there's going to be there's going to be people who want it, and maybe they're still the minority, but they're going to probably be loud about wanting this calendar, especially since the old one had it. But it's an interesting, not giving into that urge to have to create yet another feature and something that's like you're saying, like, so complex.
What's interesting about it too is that there's a couple other products out there that started without calendars that have since added them. So Asana didn't have one at the start, and they added one. Trello didn't have one at the start, and they added one. So like everyone's still adding calendars to their product. It's like every product can do 2 things at least: send emails and have a calendar. It seems like.
And right, yeah.
So we're just trying to see how it goes without that. I think the thing that's interesting is to think about, what are people trying to do? What progress are they trying to make with what they would use a calendar for? And if it's just posting a series of deadlines and dates, that's one thing. If it's actually like coordinating meetings and scheduling things that are frequent and ephemeral, like just a thing that I need to get 7 people together because we have lunch, like Basecamp probably isn't the best tool for that. Do people, when they say calendar, do they really just mean a grid? Because a grid is a comfortable way of looking at dates. People are just used to it from years and years and years of that format. It's kind of interesting to get into what people really want versus when they say I want a calendar, maybe they just want a grid. Maybe it's not about moving things around. Maybe it is. I don't know. I've heard different points of view on all this, but anyway, we're shooting for this different approach, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Do you have some kind of thresholds of what it's going to look like? What would the signal look like that would tell you that you should go back and add the calendar? Is you know, like, is it just people kind of asking you constantly over email, or is it you guys finally kind of realizing that you want it? I'm just kind of curious if there's something already in your head that's going to trip where you're going to be like, okay, let's now commit to that, or is it just a gut thing as you go along?
Well, I think we're going to feel some heat at the beginning on anything. There's because so like the way I like to do things is just kind of let stuff roll in for a few months before making any decisions about major things like that, because there's a lot of gut reactions about certain things when you're used to certain things. So like I just want to let that cool off for a little bit, and then we'll know. I think we'll know in a good 6 months, like if we're fine, if we're not. I mean, one thing we've done with this new version is we've made it much easier to. We've actually not even just made it much easier. We've optimized the experience around saying, if you want this event on a calendar, pop it on your own, and give you very clear buttons and ways to do that, and then offload the sort of reminders and conflicts and all that stuff to whatever calendaring tool you're already using, because that's where all your other stuff is. One of the things that's interesting about making calendars is that if you already have your own personal calendar and you're trying to schedule things on a business calendar, like you might have conflicts, but they're not the same. And so I just feel like it's almost better just to have like your canonical calendar, your place where you know where your things are. No matter what tools you use, let those kind of pop stuff on the calendar that you choose. That's what we've been finding is sort of the most effective way ultimately of doing this. Otherwise, you're double booking and you didn't know it, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff possibly going on. So anyway, we'll feel it out. We'll see how it goes. We know how to make them. We've built some great ones. But we just want to see if we can approach this a little bit differently this time.
Yeah. And I think this plays well into what you just, I think you were talking about on, I believe on Medium, about, what was it called? What are you guys calling it? The
adoptional.
Adoptional. I mean, this is, when you look at calendars, I mean, calendars are one of those things that like people become kind of married to, obviously, because they're invested in it from like other tools. And I mean, this helps you kind of like, you don't have to give up your calendar, you know, even if you want to join the team, like you can, you know, just use this to plan some of those events on your calendar that you're already married to. I like that. Yeah, that's an interesting way of I don't know, judoing into kind of calendaring without making people feel like they have to kind of give up that whole tool just to kind of use that part of Basecamp.
The other thing I've noticed is that in any given project or any given work you're doing, let's say there's a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen events over the course of 3 months or something, you know, there may just be a few that you really care about. You want to pop those on your own calendar. And there may be a bunch that you don't care about. Now, clearly the product can also say like, well, in Basecamp, say I don't care about this, or I care, like you can do all that stuff. But again, like when you have dates spread out, dates are these things you kind of want to see overlapping, because if I schedule something at 3 in Basecamp on Wednesday and I had something on my personal calendar at 3 on Wednesday, or I have a third calendar because I'm using another tool, like you have all these moments where you actually create anxiety and create over double bookings and the whole thing. So we kind of didn't want that to be the case. So anyway, we'll see how it all shakes out. But it's kind of one of these it's one of the bigger decisions which we're making that we haven't really questioned a whole lot, even though we know in the past, every time we've tried to avoid to do this, we feel like we always end up doing it. It's sort of just an interesting internal dynamic about why we've chosen not to go down that road this time. And instead, we've gone down other roads and created value in other ways that we think are far more valuable than adding yet another calendar to the world. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah. You also brought up, this was really interesting that you just brought up too, this whole concept of cooling off and cooling off when like you hear the feedback. Like this is, it's not natural. What you just said, like it doesn't feel natural to do this. And like I keep realizing this too. Like we just realized this in Highrise. I mean, we realize it all the time. Like here we are in Highrise changing things, and we're changing things for people. You know, Highrise hasn't changed a lot in the last, you know, 5 years or whatever. And so we're surprising people with some of the things that we tweak. Even if we think it's small, there's certain things we don't even predict, like in terms of what people kind of have established for workflows. You know, and they depend on things like a certain, we've talked about before, like this certain number of lines that are displayed in the previews of a message, and it has to be like 8 exactly for some of our customers, because you know they've actually formatted emails a specific way because of what they expect inside Highrise, and it's like that's something we didn't expect when we changed the number of lines in the previews. And it's a small subset. But when we've made some of these changes, there's a lot of hot feedback, and some of it is upset. It's like, oh man, this changed, and I hate it. I hate upsetting any customers, but we do these things because we think it makes the product better. We think it actually saves steps for most of our customers, and it is more in line with what they expect to get out of the product. But there's going to be people that get upset. But what I keep realizing too is when there's that moment, like when we deploy something, we start getting that like hot feedback, and it's like, we could right now revert everything and change it back to the way it was, and then where we left, like better. We learned all these things, and we were trying to make the product better, and now we're back at the beginning where it's just the same as it was. Is that really better? So I have to keep kind of reminding myself and the team, because there's that natural reaction of like, let's either revert or like, let's immediately throw something else at it and try and solve it again. And it's just like, let's just let it cool. Like, let's just let it go for a bit. People are going to get upset. Some people are getting upset. Let's just see if even if we get a lot of emails at the moment, like, let's just see how this continues. And more often than not, it dies out. People become adjusted. We learn some new things. We learn new ways to deal with it. Sometimes we are able to fix some things, but it's usually never in the heat of the moment. Like, you really need to kind of sit with it for weeks and see like how it's going.
It's sort of like changes have a half-life basically, and some half-lives are like, it's really short. So there's a lot of radiation around the change, and then it's like dies out in 3 days and people get used to it. Other things, like, it just keeps spewing radiation, right, for weeks or months, and then okay, this is sustained negative reaction. There's probably something here. But if you go off and change things because there's any radiation or any heat, like, immediately, it's very difficult to make interesting progress without being able to make interesting changes. And if you're afraid of that immediate feedback and you want to like placate it, make it go away, it's just going to be hard to make real progress on a product, I think, in interesting ways. So I kind of just let things simmer for a while and see, is it still boiling? How long is it boiling for? Is it still boiling? Like, let's give it a few weeks. Let's give it a month. Let's just see. Let's see what happens. And I have this perspective because I've been doing this for a long time. And I've seen people hate on something when it's been released, and then 3 months later defend that new thing against another new thing that we try. And so, like, initially they hated it, then they grew to love it, and then we tried something new and they hated the new thing again and fell back on the thing that they originally hated but now love. Like, I just see the people get used to things, and you kind of got to let that all shake out and see how the dust settles, and then decide where to go with it. So it's hard though, and especially initially when you release something that does cause a lot of heat, because sometimes it's often like it doesn't often come off as like a suggestion. It comes off as anger, and the anger is hard to let. It's hard to see people be angry about something you put a lot of work into and you change, and so sometimes you feel like the urge to change it back, so the anger goes away. But I just found it's better just like, let's sit back and just see how it shakes out for a while.
Yeah, and I've also been realizing most often in a lot of these situations, like when we changed, we went through this too, again, when we changed, like this interesting thing happened. When we changed the size, we got rid of, there was 2 views in Highrise, like a condensed view of kind of your activity feed, and a kind of a non-condensed view, an expanded view to show a bigger preview. We simplified it at the moment. We've gotten rid of the condensed view, and this met some heat. And when we started, again, like, so the original, that knee-jerk reaction to deal with it is like, okay, let's just put the condensed view back in. But then when you started asking people like more and more questions about like, why was this so important? Or like, where's this pain coming from now? You start hearing things. So we started hearing things like, it wasn't so much the condensed view that they needed or really loved. It was the fact that they were counting things. So they would go down the activity feed, and they were counting the icons or counting the avatars. And it was like they were generating a report for themselves. And because it was expanded, it was harder to do the count. And so it's just like, man, there's a better way for us to give you a report of what you're looking for, than just to kind of throw back in this condensed view. And so, now we have some designs of reports that we can do that would solve that problem so much better than just, encouraging people to kind of count these little things. But yeah,
so you wouldn't have gotten to that insight had you tweaked it, like changed it back. Yeah.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, we would have changed it back. We would have, gotten rid of the heat and then probably just moved on, and it was like, and then we would still have a product that only, half meets the need of what they really wanted. I mean, they want a report, they want counts. They don't want to have to count it themselves, but we just so happen to have a view that makes counting themselves a little bit easier. I mean, this goes back to kind of what we were talking about Friday. Like sometimes that like inflicted pain, it sucks, but it's like a necessary thing to learn a lot from, yourself, from your users. It's not something that we would encourage ourselves to do, but it happens. And it's like something you got to kind of live through and come up with solutions for, not just try to avoid and knee-jerk reactions to kind of, go away from it really fast. It's good to kind of, I don't know, just kind of sit inside it for a little while to try and understand why it's happening.
Yeah. These are really hard. This is really hard, especially for first-time product releases. Like what you get a team together, you make something in 5 months, and you put your product out for the first time ever. And some people just don't like what it does, or maybe it's like the version 1.1. Like you release the thing, no one had used it before, so it's hard not to like. It's hard to hate it yet. But then people have grown into it, and the first major release, like this is a real challenge, I think, for people who are just getting into product work. Because the natural instinct is like, wow, everyone's hating on this right now. Naturally, I want to make the hate go away. But anyway, this is a good one. This is, I think, a really good topic, and it's just a hard human one to deal with.
Yeah. And it is scary. I mean, I think there's examples out there that, like Dig was a good example, right? I mean, Dig was blamed for a redesign that, I don't know, alienated users so much that Dig ended up shutting down. Like Dig went from darling to shut down in like, I don't know, in the course of a few months, I guess, if I remember that accurately. But I'm curious. I don't even know if it was, the blame was on like a sudden redesign. But I'm curious if there was were other things in play. So there are examples out there that I think do scare people as product designers. And it is a scary one sometimes to kind of face that. But yeah.
We got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Any other topics we want to hit on real quick?
In 3 minutes. I don't know. So something I'd like to talk about, and in the future, I'm stuck on like the why. Not stuck so much as like this is really important to me that we figure out the why we work on Highrise, or why I work on Highrise. And we'll visit this a little bit later, because this will be a little bit more thought out. But like, I'm a huge fan of if anybody hasn't seen Simon Sinek, I don't know how you pronounce the last name, Sinek, I believe. He's got a great book out there called Why, or something about why, and he's got his TED Talk on why is I think my favorite TED Talk I've ever seen. I've seen it like a dozen times. But he talks about like that the great companies like explore the why of like what they're doing. Like, Apple is about, bucking the status quo, and it's not so much about selling computers, or people don't, they're not glued onto Apple because they just sell a great computer or a great MP3 player. They believe in what Apple believes. They believe that things should be different, that they should be well designed, they should be simpler.
Right. It's kind of like is it a philosophy, you mean? Like what is the reason for the company existing?
Yeah.
Why do they exist? Beyond manufacturing products, because they could just make a great product, but great companies, there's something more than that, right?
Yeah.
I actually don't remember that talk. I think I'd seen it, but I don't remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, and Simon has some great examples of everything from going back to like even what it does for hiring or bringing people to kind of follow you to run the company or work at the company. He talks about like the Wright brothers, how like the Wright brothers, they were broke and they paid, they were nobodies. Nobody followed them. There was no press about the Wright brothers. There was press though for this guy named, is it Langley? He was also trying to do flight, and he was well funded, and all the newspapers were following him. And it was like the Wright brothers who like finally figured this out and had all these like people, working for them through, sweat, blood, and tears just because the Wright brothers believed in something bigger and believed in creating like human powered flight, and they weren't in it for the money. They weren't in it as a job, and all this guy Langley was in it for was like fame. And as soon as the Wright brothers won or won the first version, it was like even further evidence, because Langley quit. He didn't even want to try the second version of flight. He didn't want to even improve on this idea. He just wanted to be the first, and that was it. That's all he believed in, and he failed. It's a very, like believing in fame. It's not a very powerful force to kind of keep people following you and win.
Right.
But yeah, it's about philosophy. It's about why this company exists, and it's this very powerful force that exceeds how well you design or manufacture a product, and that's kind of probably why Apple is so successful. Even though we see on the outside the gloss and the brand, it's really much more, I think, about what we think Apple believes in, that why we follow them.
Well, it's probably similar to why religion is such a strong force in the world. People want to believe in something, and they try and find someone or something that has similar beliefs. And I imagine a lot of people who appreciate Apple's products kind of have a similar point of view about why they're frustrated by a whole bunch of things that don't work, and all the things that Apple actually stands for. So it's a really good topic, and it's important. This is actually another one. We should talk about this more for the next call. I'd like to get into this more. So.
Yeah, it's something I think you guys have exemplified very well. I mean, especially as Basecamp, especially in the early days of 37 Signals and Basecamp.
Well, that's kind of what I want to talk about, because I kind of wonder if we've maintained that, and what goes into maintaining that, because it's interesting. Well, we'll talk about this. Yep. We're already out of time, so we'll save this for the next show. So
everybody, we got some cool stuff already talking about what we want to talk about next time. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And appreciate any follows on Twitter also. We let everybody know on Twitter when these things are happening and what we're talking about. So please share with your friends, and we will see you guys online later.
Later on.
Bye.